But if a bird, you know, poops on my car, I'm not going to fix that. It's a thing that happens. You know, I'll wash it off.
And there are natural systems that deal with that, I think is the point.
Yeah, I guess I think of it as a response. What are my responsibilities? And what are our responsibilities as, you know, public servants? And it's not wrecked.
If you've got a question, I would like it in the microphone used because we're taping this.
I forgot my question because you made me wait 2 seconds. That's how fast.
I have that too.
My question is, it appears that all the polluted areas up from Manatee County are flowing right through and entering through, passing out through the city of Venice area. Is there any plans afoot to change back to the original flows?
What a great question. Oops, here we go. This is the Donna Bay project. I started out saying it's a project, and this is part of the Cowpens New Canal system, and this will take, and its construction starts pretty soon. The design's all done. We have a company, and they'll be taking water off and running it through ponds and wetlands. And this is phase 1. We take water offline, and it purifies the water. Phase 2, which is a lot more conceptual, would be then diverting that water over to what used to be the, what is it called? Venice Minerals Sand and Shell Mine down in Venice, off of Laurel Road, I think it is. And there'd be a couple of options. One would be you could run water back to the Myakka River. This is purely conceptual. And the other is there's a subdivision right here who might want to use that to irrigate their property. But reusing the water makes a lot of sense, but that's not a hard plan at this point.
That'll be discussed later when Steve begins to talk.
So the expectation is that this will make a big difference downstream, and we have reason to believe that that would happen partly because of the Celery Fields. Celery Fields Regional Stormwater Facility, here's where it's located, out on our canal system in the Philippi Creek watershed. And you know, it's a very popular place. Birds love it, and bird-loving people love it. And we did a study a couple of years ago, and when I looked at this graph, I actually did this one, and I said, like, this is rainy season. So inflow and outflow in rainy season, real messy, hard to see what's going on. But in dry season, which is most of the year, the water, a lot of water that goes in doesn't come out. That ends up being 2 to 4 million gallons a day. And it's 10% of the watershed that gets treated by celery fields. So this sort of impoundment seems to reduce the excessive volumes that are normal in a developed landscape. So this is part of the clues that we can use to say, yeah, this Donna Bay project makes sense to me. But I started out with, what about you? I'm back to what about you? What can you do? Let's start with the bottom. Be a community leader. Communities can do a lot of things that people like me can't do. In South Venice, they are they have reached out to the Board of County Commissioners, our bosses, and they have a good relationship with them, I think. And my bosses like what they're doing. They're helping themselves. So there's a real positive energy around that. But manage wastewater well, pick up dog food, restore some nature, reduce your stormwater impact with pavers, things like I've talked to you, cisterns. Don't over-fertilize. Don't take all the fish and enjoy this place where we live. Great place, great water here. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I do have a question. Will your projects expand to other areas in the county? Because the county takes care of all stormwater in the county.
Yeah, we have 600 miles of canal systems, so I hope so. You know, it's a learning process, but you know, when I go and talk to people, I've yet to find the person who's like, I want the dirty water. I want the pond or stream that was horrible looking and is concrete lined and is everybody's on the one side. Everybody wants something nice in their neighborhood.
Steve Swan is up in a minute, but we've got a couple of questions for him.
When they do a project such that they plan to do across the street and turn the floodplain into 22 acres of retention ponds, what is that going to cause?
I don't know specifically. You know, I don't want to get into your whatever political issues we're having here, but I can tell you that converting land from undeveloped to developed is its whole issue. You know, that's not my job. But a well-designed stormwater system, if you're going to have a developed landscape like we have, a well-designed stormwater system can really do a great job. Like in Palmer Ranch, there are places like that where the water really gets cleaned up. You know, there's littoral shelves, there's a lot of life, and if you're going to have developed landscape, just do a good job of it. You know, and we are going to have.
But I thought you said if you don't want the water cleaned up because it feeds the fish from the wetlands.
Floodplain. Yeah, I love floodplain. I think floodplain's really important. Yeah, and we're losing floodplain. You know.
Okay, so we would lose the feed fishing area.
Well, that would be a specific question, and I don't know the place you're talking about. But when you talk to like snook scientists, they say floodplain is really hugely important. Peace River floodplain makes Peace River a fantastic snook reservoir.
Okay.
Jono and then Maynard.
So, just this weekend, I spent a day and a half installing a urine diverting composting toilet in the floodplain of the Mayaca River. And I think there's a common misperception that urine is basically water, and what we're really worried about is the solids. 88% of the nitrogen is in urine, and 2/3 of the phosphorus is in the urine. So if you can just take that out of the system through these urine diverting toilets, you can use it later, you can dilute it and use it as a fertilizer. So I would encourage anyone who's thinking about a new home or a vacation home or a second place to really look into this technology, because it really has the potential. That Sarasota County, I don't believe, has ever denied a septic tank in a flood zone. They will have people elevate the drain field, but that doesn't mean that material is not moving down and then laterally. So this is a relatively new technology, and it just has a lot of potential to keep nutrients out of the system.
Interesting.
Can you repeat that? The name of it?
Well, I can give you a company, but it's called the Urine Diverting Composting Toilet.
Yes, sir.
I live in Whitaker Bayou, and before I moved there was a plan to clean up the water that National Estuarine Program was trying for a grant. It would create a filtration system and clean up the shoreline. And none of that's happened. The county could probably have, I mean, at the time I was moving in, it was during the recession, and it would have created so many jobs. There was so much money available from the federal government. Never cleaned it up. The county stormwater has been there for 25 years, and it's a business, and it has the goal, I mean, the regulations to clean up the water to those standards that you said, and we pay a fee. It's kind of like a racketeering, though, because you don't have a plan to ever clean up my bayou, and the plan to be a plan, which became a plan, won't do it. It won't clean it up. And so my concern is that if any other business in the world had this kind of thing, it would be racketeering, basically. Is that you have a product that you have to provide at a certain level of service, and it's not provided. And, you know, it's not just that the water is bad, it's a public health hazard. And you talk about the sediments, but these sediments have, you know, it's a Superfund site basically in front of my house. And you could even put filtration systems on the stormwater outfall, but you don't. And so we just have a flood of garbage because the street drains directly into the bayou. And so we have garbage from, you know, the delivery day of the rain, you know, when it rains and your garbage goes in there, it's like a conveyor belt, so we just have trash, and then that gets into the sediment. So what I was just wondering, do you ever plan on actually achieving any of these goals? I mean, you know, 40 years, all the clean water.
I don't know if I can, we need to have a private conversation about, there was a lot in that question, so I can understand it better, and I do want to understand it better. But we definitely work. We have projects all the time to improve water quality. It's a normal thing. Old Bradenton Road just had some quality improvement up there. But it's an expensive proposition. That's why you see a lot of small features like parking lots. And a lot of it's privately owned. So it's not our infrastructure. It's a community effort. If we want to see things better, we really need to work together.
And of course, you know that he's not a policymaker, he's a manager. He has to adapt to the policies that come from above. Well, I want to thank you, and I'm going to introduce Steve. Stephen Swan is a professional engineer specializing in watershed management, planning, and restoration. He is the former County Stormwater Director and served as Executive Director of the Sarasota County Planning and Development Services Business Center. He's now with a local small business and is a partner in Progressive Water Resources, and they consult with organizations and companies assisting agricultural operations to manage their water resources throughout Florida. And he's including the largest organic farms in the United States, Lady Moon Farms, which is in Sarasota County. Charlotte County, I'm sorry. Steve's going to provide a perspective on integrated watershed management that may answer some of the questions you've raised.
Thank you. And I just have, well, maybe hopefully just a 10-minute presentation. John and I have worked together for years, and we didn't coordinate this, but I think it'll tie together. So John's talked about a lot about water quality. We also look at for water management, flood protection. John talked about natural systems. And the thing that always, especially policymakers, migrate towards is water supply. So for our area, do you know where your water comes from? Well, ultimately from the sky. It all is rain, more or less. But we actually have a pretty intricate system for water supply. We're tied with 3 other counties, Charlotte, DeSoto, and Minnesota, through the regional water supply authority. And the blue circles represent surface water reservoirs, Manatee, Bradenton, Northport, Punta Gorda, and the green represent groundwater, well fields. So the 2 sources are integrated together through the Regional Water Supply Authority. But the groundwater sources are what are kind of interesting because they generally come from what's called the Highlands Ridge. So the water management district that we're in, Southwest Florida Water Management District, actually has a piece of their district that extends through this area, but this is another water management district around it. This is what that area looks like. It's actually literally a ridge. So there's lakes and the water pressure, it takes centuries. We talk that the water that we drink and pull out of the deeper aquifers here probably was from rain that fell during the Revolution. There we were. So it takes a long time for the water that falls on this ridge to move its way through the deeper aquifers. And it's a very complicated system, particularly in Sarasota County with the Venice clay, which forms a barrier. One revelation I wanted to pass on to you on water supply. This is a graph that identifies the percent of homes that have in-ground irrigation systems. That's the blue line. The yellow bars are the building permits that were issued. This is pretty typical of Florida. I think this was up in the Gainesville area. But you see in about 1960, 1970, 1980 in particular, it starts rising quickly. The percentage of homes with in-ground irrigation systems. That's when we started with the master plan communities, the DRIs, the requirement for St. Augustine turf. What we also did is basically require people to put in irrigation systems. And that has resulted in an enormous amount of water being used without really what I would consider much beneficial use. On the other end, where does your food come from? That's a lot more trickier question, I think. So some people may say the refrigerator, other Publix, the distribution center, but ultimately the farm, and where is that? Is it even in the state of Florida? Florida has a robust agricultural economy. During the Depression, it was one of the things that just kept on chugging. People always need to eat. It's not that robust in Sarasota County. Our water quality in the groundwater is naturally that water from Highland Ridge picks up so much minerals in the decades and centuries it takes to move down through the aquifers that it's relatively highly mineralized, a lot of salts in it, and that's why the major people that use it, the big utilities, have to do expensive treatment, reverse osmosis and whatnot. But these are pretty conventional agricultural operations throughout the state of Florida. So just looking at it in scale, John mentioned the Florida House. One of the things the Florida House is looking at doing, and John and I both volunteer there, is to create an on-site landscape that has edibles in it for the individual to look at how to grow a garden with food at your home. You can see a pile of compost in the back. They get free compost, and the elevated building will have a cistern underneath it that'll pick up the water from the rain that falls on the roof and be able to recycle it for irrigation. At the community scale, Sarasota County actually has, you can see a list there of all the community gardens. This is the one in the Palmer Ranch, or the Clover House Community Garden. They have their own little water supply that runs on solar, and they've become very, I'd say the thing they do probably more than anything else is make compost. That's really, making the soil is what's the key. But then taking it to the watershed scale, and this happens to be the same watershed that John had talked about, where a significant portion of the Myakka River was diverted from the Myakka River to Donna Bay. And when I was with Sarasota County, I looked at, from that work, how much excess water was taken from the Myakka River to Donna Bay. And the construction of the canal started, I think, in the late 1960s. So we actually created a pretty sophisticated model, determined the little blue bars are what would normally have gone there. The higher ones, the light blue, are the additional amount of water each year. This is what it looks like if you accumulate it every year. And it's basically about 4 times more water is going to Donna Bay than what historically went there. So what that does is it causes the salinity every wet season to pretty much go fresh. And the oyster population can never stabilize in Donna Bay. Roberts Bay has a similar phenomenon from the Blackburn Canal that was dug all the way across the Black River. By the way, this different color is not pollution, it's just the salt water pushing in on the fresh water being the darker blue. So as part of that plan that John mentioned, these were the goals, and they really started with trying to restore the hydrology, the natural wetlands, the natural hydraulic regime of both the estuary and the watershed, making sure it was done in a way that doesn't cause any flood damage and that would improve water quality. And the last objective is to develop a water supply options that are consistent with those other goals. This is unique, I think, in the state of Florida, because every other plan, that is number one. Developing water supply dictates everything else, and all those environmental and water quality goals become secondary. So this is the watershed. What's shown in green are existing public lands. There's also the 2 sites shown here in blue, number 1 and number 2. Those were sites that, when I worked for Sarasota County, we acquired. They're strategic locations in the watershed for storing water. The one on the left is actually part of Cowpen Slough. It was diked, pumped, and they tried to grow citrus in it, but it's so low that it didn't really work out too well. You can see the historical wetland area. This is the slough right here. The signature is clear when you look at this stuff for a long time. So a good portion of that historical slough system was put back under public ownership. The site on the right is a sand and shell mining operation that was almost pretty much winding down. So what we did was we acquired the land and leased it back to the entity to finish pulling the material out, and at the end of the day, the public would have a place to hold water. This right here is the historical Cowpen Slough, where it used to go to the Niagara River. It was diverted the other way. So if not for the canal, this is where water would want to go naturally. So that's why these two areas were so strategic for holding water. The plan on the left is more or less the plan that John talked about, where water is going to be rediverted off of the canal into the public lands, into this existing storage areas. New ones are going to be created here. Eventually it'll come down into Venice Mineral and be stored. And what we found out, so that's a great way to re-plumb the watershed, if you will, and kind of get the water going back into a lot of the more natural areas in the historical slough. But the volume, the total volume has really not been impacted and reduced, and that was really the main objective. So to do that, what we wanted to try and do is recycle that water in the watershed. We have plenty of, believe it or not, a lot of people don't believe this, but we have a lot of water to grow into for water supply. The Peace River Reservoir that Sarasota County bought into, we're probably only using 60% of the capacity of that. So there's not a lot of demand for new water supply. However, there is about 15 million gallons a day of permitted groundwater use for agriculture and recreation in the watershed. The Water Management District has a adopted plan called the SWACA, or Southern Water Use Caution Area Recovery Plan, which basically is to reduce the amount of groundwater pumping in this area. To do that, they've allocated funding to get people that are using groundwater to use surface water. And they'll pay 50 to 75% of the cost to do that. 50% normally, but 75% if there's a water quality or environmental benefit. So one of the opportunities is to take the water, and this is this site right here, and recycle that water after it's captured and stored in this facility and use it for to offset the groundwater withdrawals and use it for agriculture. Mitch Blumenthal with Global Organic, the gentleman that has the distributorship in town, we've had several meetings with a couple of the county commissioners to try and see if we can't lease this area up here that's abandoned citrus and use it for organic farming and use the water, recycle the water for irrigation and actually start reducing some of the fresh water that's going in.